Sorry about the technical error. I take it that for those people listening live, we may have missed some of the presentation. However, there's a very helpful PowerPoint on the VDOE website that you are welcome to download and take a look at to catch up, but we will keep going. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so next we will review some of the professional learning opportunities and some specific examples of actions schools have been implementing this year to address chronic absenteeism. So during this current school year, the Office of School Quality and Office of Student Services collaborated to offer collaborative learning cohort opportunities for school leaders and members of their attendance teams. 72% of school divisions were involved in at least one of the cohorts. Both cohorts included an e-learning series conducted by Attendance Works, and then in the fall, the cohort members participated in an in-person session, which included presentations, collaborative planning time, and a panel of school leaders who shared promising practices they had implemented. The spring cohort included a virtual session, which included 3 different schools highlighting specific strategies they were utilizing in breakout rooms for collaboration. We do have one final session coming up in June for both cohorts where they will have the opportunity to review their data, talk about their plans for next year, and successful strategies they used during the past school year. In addition, we have provided numerous resources, including a Virginia's One Stop for Improving Attendance Canvas course, the academic review tool, attendance modules on the VDOE website, and additional webinars. Here is a sample of just some of the research-based action steps that schools and division leaders are implementing to address chronic absenteeism. They are conducting weekly attendance team meetings, tracking attendance data, and conducting root cause analyses, communicating frequently with parents through a variety of methods for proactive communication about the importance of attendance, dispelling misconceptions, and after students have been absent, building positive relationships with students, and providing tiered interventions based on data and specific student needs. I have the privilege of getting to share with you some work being done in 3 different school divisions. Again, this is just a highlight of 3 divisions that have interacted with VDOE staff recently. There are many other divisions we could have selected today to highlight, and the context and resources within each school and division vary, which in turn influences the action steps that they choose to implement. So in Caroline County Public Schools, they have been utilizing the following strategies. Their care teams meet regularly with the goal of identifying students in need, engaging families, building relationships, and linking students and parents to community resources. They have a division-wide tiered intervention structure for core, targeted, and intense interventions. They've been conducting empathy interviews with students. They include an attendance flyer in their monthly division newsletters to families. In the summer of 2022, they did a book study using Engage Every Family, and they conducted targeted home visits to rising 9th graders that have been identified to help build relationships and assist families with getting ready for the start of the school year. They also had family events that they held across the county at community locations to establish positive relationships with families outside of the school setting. As a result of these actions, Caroline County Schools has seen some improvements in their chronic absenteeism rates. The table that they provided shows each of the 5 schools in Caroline County and their chronic absenteeism rate from January 2023, and then during the months of February and March, you can see how the rates have been declining in each school over time. Next, we will look at action steps being implemented in Manassas City Public Schools. All schools now have a full-time bilingual family liaison to enhance outreach to families in general and specifically about the importance of regular attendance and the connection between absenteeism and dropouts. Formal attendance teams meet regularly, and the middle and high schools have enhanced their systems for tracking and analyzing data. School counselors utilize reflection surveys with students to identify root causes and develop appropriate prevention and intervention strategies. The high school has implemented an evening school as a way to serve students who need alternative scheduling in an attempt to combat both chronic absenteeism and the high number of dropouts. Data they provided shows us that at the high school, 26.5% of students had missed 10% of more of membership days as of March 10th of this year, which is down from 29.3% at the same time last year. And then students that they have enrolled in the evening school are attending regularly and reaching out to administration when they need to miss due to illness and family issues. Students have reported feeling more connected to the program than they did the traditional school. One last highlight is from Lee High School, where their attendance teams meet regularly to review attendance data and identify individual students' needs and which team member is responsible for providing support. They have personalized contact to students and families through phone calls, letters, meetings, and home visits to discuss how the school can remove barriers to attendance and clarify the importance of attendance. They have created a new chronic absenteeism facilitator position to lead attendance teams and the efforts to improve attendance. They are connecting efforts to improve attendance with their efforts to reduce dropout rates, and they have increased proactive parent communication regarding attendance. At Lee County High School, during the 21-22 school year, the chronic absenteeism rate was 40%, and current end data provided by the school indicates the chronic absenteeism rate is down to about 20%. So you can see they've been making some gains with those actions they've implemented. The last action we wanted to highlight today is the Engage Virginia program, which was communicated to divisions in late January. The 2022 General Assembly appropriated $3.5 million for the VDOE to contract with a provider to help school divisions with support and coaching for disengaged, chronically absent, and struggling students. VDOE contracted with Graduation Alliance to create the Engage Virginia program, which will provide online support for up to 18,500 students statewide. The Engage Virginia services are available to students, families, and schools at no cost through the partnership. To date, 47 divisions have opted to participate in the program, and approximately 10,000 students have been referred. We do not yet have specific Virginia outcome data related to the program, as it is just beginning, but we will certainly bring back that data when it is available. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Amy.
At the March business meeting, there was a request to see the distribution of the chronic absenteeism data, and the next couple of slides show this distribution for the most recent 4 years in which we collected data. These two graphs show the chronic absenteeism rates for schools pre-pandemic. Most of the schools had rates that were less than the level 1 state benchmark, which was 15%. And the mean and the median for each school year are shown below the graphs and hovered around 10%. These two graphs show the data for the 2020-2021 school year and for the 21-22 school year. And it's important to remember that in 2020-2021, schools were providing virtual instruction and divisions used locally defined definitions of meaningful engagement to determine whether a student was counted as present. In the 21-22 school year, you can see that the data shifts considerably to the right, and that over 62% of schools had rates that were above the level 1 state benchmark of 15%. The mean of the 21-22 chronic absenteeism rates was nearly 20%. This historical look at the data provides the data in ranges. The three ranges that are shown on the graph, the blue bar represents schools that had less than or equal to a 15% chronic absenteeism rate. The orange bar were schools that had rates greater than 15% and less than or equal to 25%. And the gray bars were schools that had chronic absenteeism rates greater than 25%. Again, you could see the marked shift in the 21-22 data. As a reminder of what was shared the last board meeting, here is the Virginia Association of School Superintendents survey, in which they collected estimates of how many schools had a current year rate through February 28th of greater than 25%. There were 85 divisions representing 1,035 schools that responded to the survey, and of those schools, 25.3% had a chronic absenteeism rate over 25%. The vast,
Yes, Ms. Holton.
Can we go back to that slide?
yep,
Ms. Sipka, that's a fascinating chart because of the huge spread between the regions, among other things. Any thoughts about why we had some region 1 and
Well-
even region 2 and 3, under 20%, and then all the, some 46%. Wow, what a
So,
difference.
yeah, some of
Is
the
that, are the schools
information.
doing different things, or was the illness in the air different?
I don't know the answer to that question, but what I can tell you, and I don't have the information in front of me, I do know, for instance, that Region 1 had a smaller percentage of schools respond to the survey
Exactly.
than for Region 8.
So if they didn't respond, you counted them as,
If I just counted the schools that responded, so out of Region 1, the schools that responded.
so that means they may be not representative, but it's not like all the ones that didn't respond were counted as 0.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do know that Region 8, almost all of the,
Mhm.
But even just comparing, region
Right.
8 to region 7, it's
Mhm.
20-point gap. So, I'm sorry, region 8 to region 6. Fascinating.
all right, the VAST survey data for 22-23 is similar in some aspects to the actual 21-22 school year data. The VAST survey data for the 22-23 school year showed that 25.3% of schools had a chronic absenteeism rate over 25%. And our 21-22 school year data showed that 27.58% of schools had a chronic absenteeism rate above 25%. If the VAS estimations are an accurate reflection of the 22-23 school year data, then approximately 28% of schools in Virginia will be accredited with conditions based on their chronic absenteeism performance level. And remember, this year, the chronic absenteeism performance level is going to be assigned based on this current year rate only. So again, that would be approximately 28% of schools would be accredited with conditions. In summary, division leaders report that school divisions are making considerable efforts to re-engage students in school, and that was demonstrated in part by Rebecca's overview of division engagement. And in addition, due to the concern of absences caused by COVID-19, RSV and the flu, which influenced attendance in the fall and winter, it's unclear whether the chronic absenteeism indicator is a measure of the division's efforts to address chronically absent students. So because of this, the board is being asked to adopt special provisions to suspend the chronic absenteeism indicator from the determination of school accreditation status for accreditation year 23-24. And as a reminder, the performance level and chronic absenteeism rate will still be assigned to and reported for schools based on the current year's performance only. The school will be required to implement improvement strategies as required under the standards of accreditation. And we can address any questions you have about the presentation. We also have Dr. Leah Ortez and Dr. Quentin Ballard from the Office of School Quality in the audience who are here to possibly lend their expertise should your questions go outside of what we presented.
I move to adopt the recommendation.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yeah,
Sorry, who seconded it?
I did.
Mr. Sturtevant?
I just would like to weigh in here that I strongly oppose this action. I think we are sending very much the wrong signal to our schools, to our families, to our communities. I just think that we're 3+ years into COVID at this point, and This is a huge issue for us as a country. A lot of stories going on about cities like Washington, D.C. or others where because people are not getting back to work, getting back to normal, the businesses and our economies are struggling, challenging places. This is an area where everything I just talked about a few minutes ago on our test scores, on the children, I think we are sending very much the wrong signal. Instead of creating a culture of getting kids back to school, I know that the school leaders are just doing Herculean efforts, but I think we're sending the wrong signal here. And I think there's some other ways we could go about this. But I am voting a strenuous no on this and feel like we're very off base on this. And I'm frankly not even sure where this recommendation came from the department. And I spoke out about this last time. And I would also like to have a very firm understanding of where school districts have been spending their COVID relief funds for the last 3 years, so that we can understand if there's a correlation of what they've been spending their money on to help get some regular order back into their schools. And I would also like to have a full understanding again of what the state has been doing with the state funding. And so until I have that information, until I have a better understanding of what is going on, I just think we're very off base and sending the wrong signal to our local leaders, to our families, to our communities, and to our students.
Any other comments? Mr. Rotherham?
Go ahead, Ms. Sullivan.
I'll go. Well, I have a question for, and I know it's not fair to you, Dr. Coons, so maybe Amy can help, but because you're so new, but I just don't understand where this what's the basis for this recommendation other than the fact, well, the pandemic's still around. You know, this administration has been telling us over and over again that they want to raise standards and raise expectations, and suggesting that we've lowered standards and lowered expectations, which I might dispute some of those characterizations. But here, this seems like a lowering standards move during a year when we're trying to say we're back to normal. So help me understand. And I'm also hearing that the practical, that it's not just symbolic, that's not fair to say, but that the practical import is not that great one way or the other. So the messaging does matter. Why are we messaging lowering of releasing expectations for absenteeism this year?
Ms. Holton, I actually have several comments on a piece of paper that I was planning on reading, so I'm just going to go ahead and respond back. On my 3.5-day mark here, I can't tell you where the specific approval and final recommendation to support the suspension of chronic absenteeism. It's been part of my work for a long time. In turnaround work in Nashville, we worked very closely with attendance works as well, and their data very clearly shows that absenteeism has a direct correlation to that child's ability to be successful both in the school year but also at life. And I think when we focus on children and what's happening with children, I think several good points were raised, and it's an important space. I appreciate Rebecca and Amy's presentation about what we currently do to support this and highlighting some of the things that we do, but I do think this is an absolute focus that we have to work on together, not just with our school divisions, but with our communities, and really wrap around this. And it's helpful to better understand what is happening for our students, that 28% of our school divisions would be impacted by this. So because I don't have enough context of what exactly we've done out of that office, or where our school divisions are, or even the request you had of where our funds have been spent, it's hard for me to weigh in to say, yes, I recommend this. No, I don't. I just know that attendance is absolutely essential as we think about supporting our children, and how we do that. I'm going to have to look into that, and I'd be happy to come back in May or June and give you a full, robust kind of statement for that. But I do want to say on the record how important it is for us to focus on attendance, that attendance is absolutely necessary, and we have to support our school divisions with robust resources and support, and we have to support our communities and our families to make sure we have kiddos in seats to create the culture that we are fighting post-pandemic.
So there are two pieces to this then. One is the link you just drew, which is, and the reason this indicator's in there is because of the known impact that absenteeism has on performance. And the second that sort of swirled around yesterday was, can the divisions really do anything about it? Or are we just putting in an indicator that they can't impact? It seems to me, and again, it wasn't in there long enough for any real data to be collected, but certainly the anecdotal out of the folks in the Southwest indicated that the divisions were in fact implementing policies that impacted chronic absenteeism, that is, reduced it. And as we've seen, I guess up here, we have a couple examples of local divisions doing the same thing. So the idea that schools can impact chronic absenteeism seems wrong also. Is that your experience in Nashville?
That we are waiving.
No, I mean, do you think that schools can play a role, that there is something schools can do to reduce chronic absenteeism?
100%.
Okay, now given that, I'll tell you, I agree with Mr. Hansen. It is entirely the wrong message. And frankly, if you think about the kids, I mean, we want to get them in school. We are not asking schools to do something that they cannot do. What we are emphasizing is the need to focus on this item. And for the same reason I supported it when we put it in as a measure for accreditation, I support it now. I don't think we ought to relieve this.
Mr. President, I think staff report shows that this doesn't relieve the schools and the divisions and the folks of doing this important work. And absolutely, schools can influence this. But if we go back to the reports we receive, big looks of other states and accountability systems in the fall, this is one that is a shared responsibility. The schools absolutely have influence. But I know juvenile courts are looking for more tools. There's a lot of organizations' responsibility to try to move this marker. The report shows that this doesn't take the emphasis off. It's still reported. It's still highlighted. It still becomes an action plan for schools that are lacking there, and they're already working on it. My consideration is this. This is, in our division, or by my superintendent and around us, the results year. This is the year to see student achievement results. And again, achievement results are going to suffer in part because of absenteeism. As we come into the next accreditation cycle, I would suggest that having accredited with conditions be the bullseye on student achievement, knowing that this is still worked on. But again, I've made these points, and I respect the perspectives of the board.
Mr. Rotherham?
Yeah, this is a hard one, and I appreciate Dr. Siebert, all your work on this and communicating and educating us. As I said last time, I was undecided. I wasn't, because this is a complicated issue. I went out and I talked to school leaders, I talked to teachers, and I heard different things. I heard school leaders say, yeah, I mean, we're working in informal communities of practice trying to solve this problem. I also talked to teachers who said, you know what, the attitude around here is que sera, sera, and they're not doing enough. And I need more help making sure kids are in my classroom so they can learn for the reasons that Lisa said. So in the end, I think there's a couple of things that sort of weigh on this. One, communities do have a right to know. And I do think accreditation, it's not where it needs to be. The board's had lots of conversations about that, but it does send a signal. It's one of the few mechanisms we have to say, hey, you really need to pay attention to this over here. The consequences are not dire immediately, so this does not, result in intense disruptions and so forth. So I think we can err on the side. And so with that, I'm also associate myself with both Superintendent Coons' remarks and my colleague, Mr. Hansen, and I'm also opposed. I do think we're going to need to revisit this issue in the accreditation accountability conversations. And I would encourage, really speaking for this board member, this decision we're making is about the system we have and where we are. And nobody should infer that implies we're going to do or not do something in this new system. That's a whole different conversation. But on this one right now, the pandemic is over, about to formally declare it over. It's time to do the things that my colleagues have talked about. So I am also opposed.
Gracie?
Mr. President, I just wanted to say that in our last board meeting, Dr. Davis-Vaught brought some really enlightening comments to this this conversation, and I'd really like to thank her for that because a couple of weeks ago, between our last board meeting and this meeting, I had the opportunity to attend the Governor's Education Mental Health Summit in Williamsburg at William and Mary. And I took that thought that Dr. Davis gave us last meeting along with me in the forefront of my mind as I listened to different segments of our education community across the Commonwealth talk about how mental health is impacting our students and their ability to get to school. And I think that there are lots of things that we don't know that other school divisions are doing across the Commonwealth to really impact the chronic absenteeism issue. And so I say all this to say schools are doing really good work in this area to reach these goals that have been set for them. And so I certainly don't want to take anything away from the work that they are continuing to do. And so I'm afraid I'm going to have to side with Mr. Rotherham and Mr. Hansen on this one because I do think that schools have to be held accountable here.
Anybody else?
Just briefly, I too appreciate Mr. Hansen bringing the matter, helping us think this through, and I'm going to agree with him. I do respect Dr. Siebert's position on this, and I hear the pain that we heard from the Superintendent's Association, and I understand why they're struggling on it. I just don't think we can. I think we help the divisions by helping parents understand the importance of chronic absenteeism and that the messaging itself makes a difference. And if we give the message that we're taking our foot off the gas, that's going to be counterproductive. If we unfortunately deliver a message through a large percentage of our schools not being fully accredited because of chronic absenteeism, then that also delivers a message that I hope will be helpful in turning this really serious problem around.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I don't see any other discussion. The motion is to adopt the item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
No. The noes have that one. All right, we've been doing this pretty consistently now since 9. We're going to take a 30-minute lunch break, and we'll be back at 1:45. Getting back to order. Clearly, we need to revise the standard on how to tell time for most of the board. All right, item I. Kent, this you? Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Move to something a little more soothing, brick and mortar, or sometimes it's not, if you've done it locally. President Gecker, members of the board, Dr. Coons, good afternoon. This is an agenda item, and really the first one out of the chute, a request for release of a literary fund loan since the General Assembly adopted substantial changes at the 2022 session to the literary fund loan program. The intent was to, and we indicated a lot of that background detail of actions the General Assembly took at the 2022 session, but the intent was to open the process up, make the program much more accessible and competitive, and better resource the loan program, which the General Assembly certainly did in the current biennial budget. They set aside $200 million in literary fund loan authorization this year and next, and directed the board and the department to move away from the traditional waiting list process and move towards an open enrollment application process for loans. So with all of that teed up by the General Assembly, you adopted new guidelines to implement the General Assembly provisions back in September. The department began formulating an application process and program based on those adopted guidelines, and then we opened up an open application process from mid-December through mid-February for school divisions and localities to apply for literary fund loans. We had 19 or actually 9 divisions and localities apply for loans for 19 projects during the December through February application process. And one to date is fully ready to move forward for loan release, and that is an application from Rockingham County for to fund a approximately 40,000 square foot additions and renovation project at Broadway High School in Rockingham County, which they have been working on for several years in the planning and design phase. So that one project was really ready to go and coincided well with the timeline of the initial application process for literary fund loans under the open enrollment period established by the General Assembly. VJ Ramnarain is with me. VJ's Director of Support Services. VJ's worked with the Literary Fund Loan for many years, provides architectural and design support and technical assistance to the localities. He's reviewed the plans and specifications for this project. It's met all of the submission and documentation requirements. And this one is ready to be released. There's sufficient cash in the literary fund, of course, to fund this loan. And Rockingham County is, I think, very close to, if they haven't already, breaking ground on this project for a construction period over about 18 months. Their request is for a $14 million loan payable over 20 years. And Rockingham, under your guidelines and based on their composite index, they're eligible for a 3% annual percentage rate on the loan. The State Department of Treasury serves as the accountant and the fiscal agent for the Literary Fund, and the department works very closely with the State Treasury Department to execute and pay out Literary Fund loans. Everything's done on a reimbursement basis as the construction and renovation costs are incurred with reimbursement documentation submitted by the school division for reimbursement on the cost. President Gecker, the superintendent's recommendation actually is to waive first review here and approve the release of this literary fund loan request by Rockingham County for the Broadway High School project. Again, it's $14 million payable over 20 years at 3% interest that they are eligible for.
Okay. Any questions by the board? I don't see any. Thank you, Kent, for the complete presentation. Is there a motion then to waive first review and adopt this item?
So moved.
I'll
Thank you, Mr.
second.
Sertifin, second, Dr. Siebert. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item J, Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, President Gecker, Vice President Mann, members of the board, and Superintendent Coons. As you know, the board, in its the enormous amount of work it has to do, the legislature has provided a number of committees in order to help the board accomplish this work. One such committee is the Early Childhood Advisory Committee. And by statute, this committee is required to have a certain composition. Members are selected based on a wide variety of criteria. One such criteria is that the legislature said that the Early Childhood Advisory Committee must have a member who represents license-exempt early childhood care and education providers. That includes religious exempt providers, but also a number of providers, day camps, things like that, that the legislature said do not fall under the licensing regulations. We have that seat vacant on ECAC, as it's commonly referred to. And we have on November 4th of 2022, Superintendent's Memo 261-22, we did a call for nominations. Those nominations have been collected by department staff and reviewed, and we do have a nominee as listed in the item, Ms. Charlotte Hargraves, that we are hoping to present to you for a first and final review to get this member appointed to the Early Childhood Advisory Committee and allow for her to help that very important work that's happening. I believe you have an item in just a couple down on the agenda that was bubbled up from ECAC.
Okay, any questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sertifin, a second. Second. Thank you, Dr. Mann. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess the one we've all been waiting for. Item K, first review of divisions partnering with iTeach to provide an alternative route to licensure. Dr. Johnson and Ms. Clements. Hello.
Good afternoon. President Gecker, Vice President Mann, State Superintendent Coons, board members. Today, I bring before you for first review the applications for divisions partnering with iTeach to provide an alternate route to licensure and endorsements pursuant to House Bill 2486 of the 2019 Virginia General Assembly. As a reminder, there are three ways or pathways that we have highlighted in terms of opportunities for individuals to proceed licensure in the Commonwealth. That is through an approved program, reciprocity, and align with today's item, alternate routes to licensure. The Board of Education's licensure regulations of school personnel provide multiple routes. As you see in your agenda item today, highlighting here specifically the Career Switcher program, various alternate routes based on high need subject areas, as well as targeting specific audiences there. As you may be familiar, over the last 20 or so years, these routes reflect legislation's attempt to address the educator shortage and the needs of the divisions for innovation and a fast-track route for employment. And in the case of today's agenda item, the adoption of House Bill 2486, the General Assembly created a new, different alternate pathway to empower school divisions to directly address teacher recruitment issues in their local communities. And on the 19th, following that, the Virginia Board of Education approved guidelines for this particular alternate route to licensure in response to this bill. It was effective in 2020 and minor technical edits approved in 22. Pursuant to these guidelines, the following 21 schools highlighted divisions have applied for this particular alternate route to licensure, partnering with iTeach US. Yes. You so see these listed here. Also pursuant to these guidelines, the Office of Licensure and School Leadership coordinated the review of the proposed alternate programs. And I'll ask my Director of Licensure and School Leadership, Maggie Clemens, to provide details of that review process, some minor characteristics of the iTeach program, as well as recommendations from the review of those program applications.
Good afternoon. I probably have the distinct honor of having still the longest attachment on your board agenda, so you're welcome. All of the applications were attached. Good afternoon. I'm here to walk you through our process in our office for reviewing alternate routes to licensure under guidelines 2486 that you guys adopted last fall. This particular route, as we saw with the Arlington one, and as I've discussed with about our career switcher programs, all go through a review process before they're brought to you. There are currently 22 school divisions, and I think there might be one that is left off of this, but I've got even more coming who are interested in partnering with iTeach. iTeach is a CAPE accredited for-profit competency-based preparation program that was founded in Texas. You guys heard from the CEO and founder earlier, so I don't want to go into all the details again. But they did a wonderful job of just describing their program and what they are about. Their program does blend practical distance instruction via the internet and focused field-based experiences under the support and supervision of their staff and the division support. This particular route and all the applications were reviewed by a panel facilitated by myself and our career switcher coordinator. She's involved in the review simply because Career Switcher was our foundational program for reviewing alternate routes because the process was already there. On the panel, there were 2 members of senior leadership here from the agency, as well as a member of our Institute of Higher Education, an education dean that's familiar with approved programs at his institution, as well as a division assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, who has not only served on one of our committees before for approved program or for alternate programs, but also as a member of the VASCD board. Through that review, we determined that, the panel determined that the professional studies for secondary education endorsements were meeting the competencies of the approved programs, but felt that we needed additional support and review from the content experts here at the DOE for the elementary education endorsements as well as special ed. We also gave those. After the conclusion of that panel meeting, we gave the syllabi, the course description, the program to our content specialists here at DOE, and our elementary content specialists returned to us with feedback indicating that they felt the need that the methods courses for elementary were not being, the competencies were not being met, very much like the Montessori, because that's a national program. Again, this is a Texas-based program, and they deliver instruction to 11 other states, right? And our methods classes are very specific in what SOL standards need to be covered and what the early learning blocks are and that type of thing. So they had recommended that the methods classes be included, as well as, again, the Virginia Literacy Act and the implements and the legislation that goes along with that, those competencies that are coming forward shortly and throughout, so that they return that to the panel, and that was where the recommendation came from, was the combined review of the panel that we had put together and the content specialist here at DOE. That was a lot. Grace.
Okay, any questions by board members?
I have a question. Just from hearing from a number of the 22 counties who came before us today, and letters from others. I'm a little concerned about the conditions that were being recommended. And it seems from what I heard that the districts would prefer no conditions. And I'm just wondering why. I was having a hard time kind of racking and stacking on what the purpose of them
So
are.
remember, the panel operates under the guidelines approved by the board and that were developed because of 2486. And the actual guidelines say that they need to meet the competencies of the approved program. It's actually written into the guidelines that way. And so while the panel doesn't have the opportunity to advise outside of those guidelines, obviously the board would be able to do that.
There was a comparison of what was there based on the regs. And they just simply identified things that were not addressed.
That's my understanding that the other 11 or 12 states don't have any conditions. In their
No, there's
program.
there's other states that have conditions on the program as well.
I didn't think so. Okay.
Okay, we might want to find out what those are, because I see folks in the back of the room nodding, no, they don't.
Okay,
So-
sure. So we can certainly do that. And then I guess just to kind of finalize, we were able to have the superintendent's recommendation that the Board of Education receive for first review the recommendation of the Virginia Department of Education's panel to approve identified portions of the application submitted by divisions partnering with IT to provide an alternate route to licensure endorsements.
And I guess I should be more clear on the conditions from other states. All the states are different and have different licensure requirements. So they have to be eligible for a license, their field experience, all of those might be different from state to state. So I should probably be more clear on that.
And we can certainly provide that in the follow-up.
Okay, anybody else? Ann?
I'd just like to hear more about and maybe you've said it and I'm just fading this afternoon, so forgive me.
Good lunch.
What are the additional, we spent a lot of time with the Montessori folks and we backed off on some of the additional conditions and not others, but we went through a thoughtful process and we were satisfied there was research that justified that the things we backed off on weren't necessary. Help me understand on this. What are the additional conditions what are the additional coursework, I think is the right way to understand it, that the panel is recommending, and what's the basis for that recommendation?
Yeah. So there's nothing for the secondary. So for the secondary endorsement. So in order to be eligible for their program and to be eligible for a provisional license, folks need to satisfy content. And so part of the prerequisite for them and for the provisional license is for them to pass that praxis test or satisfy that content through coursework from their bachelor's degree. So if you're thinking of your biology majors, they went out and took a biology praxis. You're thinking of your psychology majors that went and took an English praxis. They've satisfied that content. For secondary endorsements, the professional studies that I teach is providing are good to go. All of those, no conditions.
The panel's recommendation is
For
as to secondary endorsements, we approve the
Yes,
applications
because there's a
as
praxis
submitted.
and they'll have the content, satisfied. With the elementary, remember that in addition, there's two options for getting the elementary endorsement. There's the one that's very coursework laden, and then there's one that takes some of the praxis and then lessens the amount of coursework that has to be done for each content area. But when you do that, they add in methods of teaching. And so there's the methods of teaching math, science, and social studies. Am I right? Math, science, and social studies. And that's actually part of the content requirement for elementary, but for elementary professional studies, even though they're very similar to the secondary, they add in that language and acquisition, reading and writing development as 6 hours. So when you look at the elementary, when the panel looked at that, those methods classes are very specific in the approved program regulations, and they highlight that they have to include information about Virginia's foundation blocks for early learning, comprehensive standards for 4-year-olds, and the Virginia standards of learning in English, math. So all of the things that are very Virginia-based are in those methods classes that are part of that content for them to satisfy. So that's why it's written on the content side, and then the additional professional studies for the language acquisition and the reading and writing is simply because we've got the VLA coming down the line, and there was concern that we weren't going to be the current regulations and what was in the current I teach curriculum wasn't going to meet those competencies.
So so the VLA piece, I understand. For the courses beyond VLEs,
The methods. Mhm.
the methods courses, what was the panel looked at what is already offered in I Teach, and it was the panel's opinion that what I Teach is covering is not adequate to cover what Virginia requires.
Very specifically in what those Virginia things that I enumerated. They offer the methods classes in those particular areas, but those classes aren't specific to Virginia's foundation blocks for early, and no program probably would. So, you know, the standards for 4-year-olds and Virginia standards of learning, very much like the Montessori, they didn't meet those competencies
But the
either.
board chose not to require those conditions.
Well, we chose that on Montessori because we were satisfied the research on the overall Montessori program and the other conditions we put on of temporary and annual reporting, et cetera, et cetera.
Which is why you guys get to make the decision and the panel just makes the recommendation.
But here, I'm hearing you tell me that the panels, so is there anything comparable? And unfortunately, we haven't heard, and I see the I Teach folks are here. Maybe we can hear from them this week or next week, but next month when we're deciding this. But I'd love to hear more about that. And I'd also love to hear, is there research on the effectiveness of the I Teach program? It's been around long enough in enough states that one would hope that there's some research by now on its effectiveness.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear about
provide
that.
to the
And
board.
I don't know whether the panel has that or whether you have that or how we can get that.
Could you repeat your first request, though, just to make sure I'm clear? I'm clear on the research effectiveness in other states.
I'm actually gonna, Ms. Holton, would you like us to do what is required in the Virginia methods course and what is in I Teach in kind of a side-by-side document? Would that be helpful for you?
Yes.
Okay.
And yes. And then I'd like to hear, I would like I Teach to have a chance to tell us, as the Montessori people did, their case for why they shouldn't be required to add those extra requirements on.
Thanks.
And when you're doing the list, could you give some indication of whether you believe that difference in requirements is meaningful in terms of student outcomes?
Meaningful in terms of
Student outcomes, yeah.
And you got my request for the research on the effectiveness of the I Teach program overall.
I guess related, my thought would be, since you're talking about the Virginia specific pieces of rock solid foundational programs, and this program is in conjunction with local districts,
Correct.
and this is a competency-based approach,
Correct.
that the local districts ought to have the capacity and willingness to fulfill and demonstrate those select competencies.
Correct. There's some of the applications were really robust in how the division was going to support these teachers. Some of them rely very heavily on the I Teach, faculty program and to get those teachers through the provisional license period. We have one application that they're just looking for professional studies at this point, and it mirrors a lot like Hanover, but using the I Teach program. So the Hanover, the way they're supporting their teachers and having that additional time period and Saturday, or not Saturday, but one day a month where they come in and they do professional development just for those new teachers and supporting the teachers and scaffolding in that way, which is really great.
Anybody else?
Just by way of discussion, I mean, I'm all for innovative opportunities, and especially, I wish we could figure out how not to have so many provisional teachers coming through the provisional licensure routes, especially in special ed, where it's just slightly terrifying that we're putting teachers in the classroom with so little preparation. And yet, given that we are where we are, I'm very supportive of alternatives. I do think that the difference between this and Montessori, among other things, is just quite simply the volume. I mean, we're talking about such a huge volume here that I think it will become the primary method for provisional licensees. And I think we will hear I have heard a little bit from the higher ed world that it'll effectively close down the four-year institutions programs that are cohort-based models because they just simply can't compete on price for this. And if this is a quality program, then we want our divisions, we understand fully why our divisions want to and need to go to the most cost-efficient option. But I do think that just the sheer volume of this is a huge change that we should make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's on, as we did with the Montessori application when it was a much smaller thing.
And if I could, and just, I do think we need an all of the above strategy right now. And I don't think this is going to be displacing the traditional routes. I think with the shortage that we have, just with the changing demographic and dynamics of our economy, of our labor force and other things, I think a lot of the people that go this route would not be going to the traditional schools anyway. And so and maybe just when I talk about on all the above strategy, when I was deputy secretary 20 plus years ago, you can probably count on one hand of, my tenure of things that were important or impactful in our country. And one was a planning grant we gave to Western Governors University to create their teacher college. And it is now today, which is a competency-based university, nonprofit. They now graduate more teachers than any other university in the country. I think it's over 10,000. And again, these are non-traditional, people that maybe had some college, no degree, and being able to go back and get it. And also in a prior life, I had worked very closely with a company called CALE, which is the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning. And again, more for working adults, but I just really want to suggest too that the one thing that I think gives me great comfort in the iTeach approach is the fact that they've been CAPE accredited for over 10 years. And again, with my prior life in the national accreditation system, that is significant. And I believe they're the only one that's not an institution of higher education that is in there. And I think that should give us a lot of confidence of what we're doing here. And I think the other level of confidence is the fact that we heard from 22 school systems. And I think, Dr. Siebert, to your point too, they're the owners of this, and they're going to be the ones that are, going to be making sure that the 6 courses or, whatever they're going to need to take are going to get them where they need to be. And so I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I would recommend that we move ahead, but move ahead with no restrictions. And we do have our final review coming up to where we could have time to modify that. But I would rather start that way versus having the conditions and kind of then having to go. I'd rather thoughtfully put together whatever we might need in our final review versus the other way around. But that would be my 2 cents.
Ms. Halton.
Just to, I agree with Mr. Hanson that the CAPE accreditation is a significant thing. Just to clarify my prior remark, I don't think I'm not suggesting that this program would impact the traditional EPP program licensure route, but many of the EPP programs in Virginia, including UVA, ODU, my institution, Fort Tyson, do have a provisional licensure support program that
With divisions, yes.
it does cohort partnerships with divisions that would be very similar to this, but not similar in price. So I think it's a safe bet that many of those programs will be significantly impacted, for better or for worse, if this is adopted on such a widespread basis. And that's not at all a reason not to do it if it's the right thing to do, but it's just recognizing that this is a big step.
I would say, and I think to that point, it'd probably be pro-consumer to do this because it's such a more cost-effective approach and even a time-effective approach as well. But,
If it's high quality, absolutely.
right.
Okay, we're taking this on first review. See you in June. Item L, first review of guidelines for the 2023-24 Early Childhood Unified Measurement and Improvement System. Ms. Conway, just want to tell you, the board's got an over-under going on when we're going to finish today. And you are the variable. I will also tell you, I've got over, and I'm counting on you.
I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked. I would say it is always in the spirit, Mr. Gecker, of more data and less data. So as I've scanned through my materials this afternoon, trying to be succinct. So Good afternoon, Superintendent Coons, President Gecker, Vice President Mann. I'm very excited to bring to you an important item related to improving school readiness in Virginia. What I will try to do is quickly do a crash course on the content from yesterday, and then to bring you up to speed on the guidelines for today. So, very high level, the General Assembly passed a law in 2020 directing you to establish a unified quality rating and improvement system for all publicly funded programs in order to improve school readiness. Laid out a very clear timeline, launch in 2021, provide 2 years of practice for which participation was optional, and require all publicly funded programs to participate in fall 2023 so that ratings can be released in fall of 2024. So the guidelines that we're bringing you to today are the third iteration, but potentially the most important, as this is the first real year. What I was covering in the work session from yesterday was just to make sure that you not only understood what we are proposing to change for this upcoming year, but that we have sufficient context to understand the early childhood system, our public-private parent choice system, and how it differs from K-12. And that's just a really important contextual factor. Early childhood is distinct from K-12 in that we do not guarantee a publicly funded option for every child. Instead, we focus on those children and families who are furthest from opportunity, unlikely to be able to afford childcare or preschool, and have the greatest risk of not coming to school ready. Our data consistently shows that our children in low-income households who do not participate in preschool or childcare or family childcare are much less likely to come to school prepared compared to their similarly situated peers. And so you've heard me talk before at this body, both about issues of access and choice, thinking about eligibility, funding, and how we set expectations and fund programs to meet those expectations, and on quality measurement and improvement. And though today's presentation focuses on quality, we cannot afford how these actions affect access, choice, and cost, with the predominant factor being that we work with a very different array of programs, childcare, faith-based, family day, home-based programs, and that we fund both classrooms and children, which means these are vouchers, and programs have a choice to take these families with vouchers. And if we make the requirements so burdensome that programs cannot afford to participate, that means they opt out of the system and families lose access to quality options. And then lastly, before jumping into the materials themselves, I just want to say a little bit about process. Yes, of course, we are implementing a law. This is not really a choice for the board, but we have earnestly since the beginning tried to do this as partners with practitioners across the state. Along with our other state partners, have worked closely with family day homeowners, child care directors, church leaders, principals, teachers, advocates, and families to design, implement, and ultimately drive continual improvement of quality across the system. And just wanted, before jumping in, to say thank you to anybody who's watching today, childcare, family childcare, churches, Head Start, early childhood special education schools, our Ready regions, and our ECAC, our Early Child Advisory Committee, for the incredible dedication to this effort. With that, I'm going to jump into the slides and try to move quickly while watching the clock. Wondering what kind of, a compensation that I'll be eligible for if I could come under Mr. Gepter's predictions. Again, our true north is school readiness. We have seen slight improvements, huge setbacks during the pandemic, but just for a baseline on where we are today, 60% of kids are coming in ready in all 4 areas. 40% of kids are behind in one of 4 areas, either literacy, math, self-regulation, or social skills. This is the needle that this board is charged with moving. We know that school readiness matters because 90% of the brain development occurs before the age of 5. This has been shown by brain science, cognitive science, very important. And we see, for example, there's lots of statistics out there, but this is an example of literacy, that even though it might be invisible to us, that babies and toddlers are developing and acquiring words very early on. We can then measure the vocabulary development when they're 3 or 4 and track that to 3rd or 4th grade. And then we can track a lot of our data to life predictors such as high school graduation, all going back to early childhood. In fact, we have that very data for Virginia. This chart looks at how kids do at the beginning of kindergarten and then how they do in third grade. If we get kids coming in very ready, if you look at those green bars, we can almost guarantee that they will reach the end of third grade reading on level. In sharp contrast, you see that we are not, we're not as likely to guarantee their success if they come in earlier. It's not saying that K-3 doesn't matter. We get half of kids who are behind caught up if you look at those red bars. But in order to make a difference, not only do we need to have investments like VLA in early elementary, but we have to address where kids are coming to school ready. It's a complicated system. It is a public-private system. The vast majority of sites are private programs, childcare, family childcare, faith-based programs, big and small, as well as Head Starts, the majority of which are run by private community action agencies. Different rules, different funding sources is the key sort of takeaway here. Family choice is important, and you'll notice that there's huge differences. I'll talk a little bit more about workforce and what kids and families can expect. And then this just gives us caution and how many sort of requirements we can put on any particular program or site relative to what they're already subject to. The important point here is that not every classroom, like in K-12, we're funding every kid. So in certain settings in our schools, we fund the entire VPI classroom. We set the standards, we fund them to meet those standards. Every single kid receives that amount of money. In sharp contrast, in a nonprofit childcare center, we might be funding some of the children and private parents are making the next. So if we were to significantly raise the requirements, it wouldn't only affect the kids and families that are publicly funded, but would actually have an effect on private paying parents as well. This is important as we think about not only the quality expectations that you are agreeing on today, or at least putting forward to first review, but again, just kind of thinking about how does this affect access, how does this affect cost, if we ultimately want to make sure that all kids come to kindergarten ready. And this really matters. And this I know Dr. Mann and Ms. Creasy know very well, but getting it right makes a difference. It is not enough to just offer kids care. We have to make sure it's quality. We see higher economic returns, we see better children outcomes. And so if you can build and implement and drive a system that supports continual quality improvement, that you'll get better results in kindergarten, in third grade. You'll see those results, Mr. Hansen, in the economy. And there's a ton of national evidence to this effect, that it not only helps parents earn more income and pursue greater self-sufficiency, children grow smarter. And in fact, they say that investing in high quality early childhood, whether childcare, preschool, family childcare base, pays for itself in the first 5 years and beyond. One other important characteristic, and this is apropos that we just followed the presentation by Dr. Johnson and Ms. Clements, the workforce really matters here. Babies and toddlers cannot learn from devices, from robots. They learn in the context of relationships with caring adults. And so who those adults are, how we compensate, how we recognize them is really, really important. And so this should also give you a pause. I'll talk a little bit about the workforce throughout the presentation, but we see stark differences in how we compensate our educators and what that means for turnover. And if you ultimately think about these interactions and how you use curriculum are the most important characteristics of quality, if she leaves every 6 months, then it's functionally starting over from a quality perspective. And so really thinking about how do we raise the bar to get that positive child outcomes, better school readiness, but also address a very challenging current context, which is that 40% of our lead teachers have household incomes of less than $25,000 in childcare. Only less than 1% of school-based teachers are in that situation. Okay, so VQB5, this is your name for your Unified Measurement and Improvement System. As I mentioned before, this is the first required year, and this will likely include about 3,600 schools, childcare, and family day home sites. So again, more than just schools, with ballpark 12,000 classrooms across the state. We've talked with this before. The key goal here is that we're trying to build a system that is focused, laser focused on improving school readiness outcomes, helps demonstrate growth over time, is affordable for providers and the state, is scalable, and really focuses on making sure that we're empowering the actors in the system to continually improve and providing good information to families to choose the best option for their kids. There are two components that we have tested and robustly endorsed over the course of the last few years. The number one is we measure every single one of those 12,000 classrooms. I take a breath there because next year our projected numbers are roughly 32,000 classroom observations using a nationally regarded measure, the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, where more than 200 national studies show that it's tied to higher class scores, as it's called, result in more kids learning for babies, for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. And we are trying to incent the use of high quality curriculum. Curriculum is not a requirement, but it's a way to earn additional points. And we have a list of roughly 50 approved options for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. We choose these two mechanisms, and they've been adopted in the field because they're a way to demonstrate improvement regardless of your background credential. They are not sort of necessary cost factor other than the turnover piece. And we believe that a laser focus on those two elements will help drive improved school readiness. This gives you a sense of the quality improvement with the real importance that we're putting the information, we're getting it down to the classroom level across these 12,000 classrooms so that leaders can work with educators, educators can work with assistants, teachers can work with families, continually to drive improvement at the classroom level. This is really important that we have empowerment and autonomy at every level of the system. Here's what it looks like on an annual basis. It is similar to school accreditation in that it kind of happens annually when we'll sort of have these cycles. We kick off, we register, we start to do classrooms observations in the fall and the spring. We capture other information about the teacher, about the curriculum, and then each fall, after we verify that data during the summer, we produce online reports. In the 2 practice years that have been private, after our first real year, this will be public in the fall of 2024. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move through the data that supports the changes that we've brought to you. The first big takeaway is that much of that document that we are asking you to move to first review builds on successes, and so a lot is the same. We are on track for full implementation. We're seeing improvements already in teacher-child interactions. We are building enough capacity to observe in these classrooms. We're seeing more sites than ever used approved curriculum. We've got the infrastructure in place to execute. We're supporting the workforce, even though there's still challenges, and we're hearing positive support from the field. Since this is the good stuff and we're keeping most of this, I'm not going to go through each of these slides in extensive detail just to highlight the takeaways, but please just stop me if there's any questions. So the key thing to note first is we have made progress each year, and we feel as a state we are in a good place for full implementation next year. A shout out to my Head Start partners. Nearly 95% of our Head Start sites are already participating, really leading the way there. But you'll see we've got a small gap in family day homes, childcare centers, and public schools. And I'll talk in the changes to the guidelines on how we're addressing that gap. Teacher-child interactions are improving across our age band, so it's showing already that improvement is possible in our infant, our toddler, and our pre-K classrooms. We're seeing we have more class observers. Some might say to you, how in the world are you all going to get 30,000 classroom observations done? You'll see by these charts, these are line charts for the infant, toddler, and pre-K, how many observers. You have to be a certified observer. Not anybody can just come in off the street and do this. You have to take a 2-day training and pass a rigorous test in which you actually score classroom observations. So we've dramatically increased the number of observers, and we've made sure to do that in a way that is proportionally related to the number of infant, toddler, and pre-K classrooms that we have. We are seeing more use of curriculum. This is a huge shift, as Dr. Mann and Ms. Creasy know. When we saw on the data we brought to you in the past, we saw that while almost all of our school-based classrooms and our Head Start classrooms already use an improved curriculum, those numbers drop precipitously. Only 55% of childcare and only 45% of family childcare were using any type of curriculum. And so even in the last year, by making sure that there are multiple options available to programs and offering at least one, if not two, free or low-cost options, we've seen a tremendous uptake and interest, particularly from, as you'll see in these charts, childcare centers and family day homes. We expect more progress in years to come. We've got regional infrastructure in place, again, helping think through how we will get thousands and thousands of observations done, how we will make sure all of these teachers register, how we will continue to engage families every step of the way. And so we've built out our ready regions, and they had a soft launch for 6 months, and they've now been in effect since July of 2022. We have also continued to expand Recognize B5, something that we're incredibly proud of. So some of you heard me talk about this before. This started as a randomized control trial with a federal grant, and we saw that offering just $1,500, the equivalent of 75 cents an hour, cut turnover in half among childcare teachers. Had no effect for school-based teachers, right? Because of some of the economic differences in compensation I noted before. We've now increased that to $2,500 per educator, and we serve just over 11,000 educators, representing a $25 million investment. As you saw in my numbers, turnover is still a challenge, but we think that Recognize B5 is essential as we roll out VQ-B5 and is helping to at least mitigate some of these workforce challenges. And last but certainly not least, we continue to see broad field support for VQ-B5. We are out in the field, we conduct surveys, and you'll see that these are some of the key themes and the feedback we've received in our surveys so far. So, challenges that we have to address, and this will all line up very neatly with the proposed changes that are in front of you today. We've got to get all of our sites to participate. We've got some challenges around missing observations. We've got to make sure that there's consistency and credibility statewide. I'm going to talk in a moment about the sites that need intensive support. We still are seeing some variation in curriculum implementation, and we've got to address the workforce challenges. So challenge number one is, this is just a map of sort of saying, another way of presenting the data I shared earlier is that we still have about just less than a quarter of the state that we need to get on board. And you'll see that doesn't look identical across the 9 regions. Some areas we're more focused on than others. This gives you a sense of this by sites, centers, family day homes, and public schools. We've had conversations with all of the public schools, and we believe that their administration will come on when this is no longer non-optional. And we have also been working and have talked with Dr. Mann about this, about the real importance of communicating, getting to engaging these centers and these family day homes. We've begun to map out who is not participating, how many subsidy kids they're serving, and making sure that we're getting to these programs, that they're aware of the expectations, and that we are addressing any potential disruptions that might occur for families. So for example, even though you have roughly just under 700 programs here, we're actually down to 20 programs. Only 20 of these sites serve 50 or more kids with public funds. So again, we've gotten to the big guys, making sure they're participating. We will reach out personally to each of those 20 sites, as well as bringing the other several hundred sites on board. So a lot of work, and that's some of the detail and the kind of the consequences for non-participation that are in the guidelines in front of you. We are missing some observations. So what happened during our first practice year, and this was still in the midst of some of the COVID challenges around folks not being able to come in, illness, quarantine in classroom, is roughly 30% of our sites received an incomplete in the first practice year because we didn't have sufficient observations. We think the numbers will look better for practice year 2, and in the guidelines we walk through the steps we will take to make sure that we have an accurate classroom observation or observations for each site, and clarifying our ready regions who are now responsible for those observations, making sure that we've got some accountability to ensure that every single site receives a complete rating for the first real year. Challenge number 3 is, and this is a little bit complicated, but as I said before, this is a national observation tool, and the tool, which has been vetted and used in multiple states and actually countries around the world, says that a score should be consistent either above or minus a point. That's the kind of the indicator for reliability. And generally, upon looking at hundreds of thousands of observations, whether you observe somebody in October or November, like, you should stay within that point range, a point up, a point down. We have allowed maximum flexibility to get all of these observations done. And so we say, whoever you want to locally, it might be the principal who knows the teacher, it might be the childcare director, it might be somebody else from the ready region. We're not going to worry about kind of bias or conflict of interest. We're just going to focus on getting all these observations. But as we'll talk about in the guidelines, we're also going to send out external validators or observers across the state to make sure that there's consistency. the north, the south, the east, the west, so that they'll be kind of doing the same observations and enabling us to compare results. We piloted that this year, and what we saw is while the vast majority, so 70% of our pre-K observations this year came in within a point of the external, but about a third didn't. Some were higher, some were lower. And so what we propose in the guidelines that are in front of you is that we address that by kind of creating a score replacement protocol to help drive accuracy and consistency statewide. We saw in the data from the practice year that we have a small number of sites that are scoring very low in terms of the interactions that children are experiencing in those classrooms. None of these sites are using any type of curriculum, and we sought to engage these sites voluntarily this year. And what we found is only a small number of them were willing to participate in some of the statewide improvement efforts. So our proposal in front of you today is that we require them going forward, once this is real, if they continue to score low, to participate in improvement planning. Again, not taking away their public funding, no kind of the only kind of consequence is you have to participate in our improvement planning efforts. And I'll talk more about that. But that was because we learned from the field that even if offered, and many of these resources are free, that folks were just not willing to participate. And so we think we need a slightly more firm encouragement to participate. We also found from the data this year that we think we're pushing as fast and as hard as we can on curriculum. The big takeaway here is while folks who were not using curriculum at all are able to start to add it in one or two classrooms, that if we were to require it across the board in every classroom, we would probably do a disservice to some of our child care and family day home sites. We're making an effort, but again, curriculum is not just getting a box or just getting materials. It's truly supporting the use day in, day out. And so we're going to propose that we stay the same rate of requiring it in just one classroom. And then last but not least, just continuing to look at these just challenges and turnover. So this is just a visual depiction of what I shared with you earlier, but this will, I think, be the challenge that was in front of us over the next few years as we get good data. We are building what I think is one of the nation's strongest data systems. We are capturing down to the classroom level, which children are, which classrooms, what we know about those teachers, from how much they're paid to what their background is, to which curriculum they use, to their turnover rate. So we will get, we think, unprecedented data on turnover. This is where this data is coming from, and really trying to figure out what is the right combination of supports, incentives. How do we think about encouraging compensation in the private sector that kind of helps us address this turnover so that we can provide higher quality experiences to kids and basically help produce better child outcomes. Okay, with that, these are the challenges, and I've talked a little bit about how I'm going to take them into the slides. Can we put up the next set of slides so we can shift to the actual guidelines for this year?
So Jenna, really quickly,
Yes.
I just wanted to address the challenge in the workforce. Are you guys looking at what are the benefits in, like, you look at the chart that you have here, what are the benefits that, you know, public schools are providing that child care centers or Head Start programs may not be able to compete with? In, you know, looking at how we can maybe come together to provide some of that. I don't know what you guys are doing on that particular piece.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we ask in our workforce surveys, and we get good participation in the surveys because we offer a small incentive to our leaders and to our teachers. We see a tremendous variation in terms of benefits. So while about half of the system of childcare is offering benefits, half are not. And so that is something that we're going to continue to watch and see if it looks like the data shows that making an investment in that space could help address that. Is something that we're considering. Our data thus far does suggest that compensation is just the biggest driver, and I think really thinking through how I know we brought to this body some changes to how we fund childcare subsidy, with the goal being that, like, even a tiny bit more can make a difference. We have some research that UVA is presenting that really suggests that there's every sort of marginal increase in compensation has a effect in turnover. And so really thinking about, without requiring anything else of the field, noting that we have minimum wage increases, we have other expectations on the field. How do we partner with providers to think through how to address these compensation challenges, share the bright spots where folks are figuring out how to use benefits, how to use some of the health insurance marketplaces. Many of our folks qualify for public benefits there, and that's certainly an area that we're going to continue to try to be strategic about. The one thing I want to note here, I've already walked through this, is we did receive a full endorsement after roughly a three-hour meeting with our Early Child Advisory Committee of the proposed guidelines for next year. And so this is the group that we take every policy item to our Early Childhood Advisory Committee before bringing it to you, and are very pleased, and huge appreciation to them. We went through the guidelines line by line with them just about a month ago. Okay, so the guidelines have 7 sections and appendices. Again, most of which they remain the same, with a focus on adding or changing based on those challenges that I shared thus far. On the participation challenge, if you look in section 3, you see that the key thing here is spelling out who is required to participate and walking through the consequences if programs refuse to participate. When this law was first passed, and it does require the board to establish consequences, folks wondered, oh my gosh, if I don't score well, are you going to take away my public funds? And we are not calling for that in any way, shape, or form today. What we are saying is that we need to, in order to comply with the law, make sure that we get all programs participating. And we've begun that work earnestly this spring. Letters from me, outreach, working with the Ready Regions, trying to get to every single site to make sure that they know what's expected of them, they understand, they have their questions answered, and that we bring them on board. We've also, thanks to advice from members of the board, begun to really think about a family communication strategy so that families do not, in an unintended way, experience negative consequences if a program decides to opt out. We will continue to monitor and bring these numbers to you. We did a similar approach in my work in another state of like constantly monitoring how many publicly funded programs there are and making sure that we're not seeing any drops in participation as a result of the regulations. On the classroom observation, so this goes back to kind of the 2 challenges I named before. One is making sure that we get good data on every single classroom, and so making sure that we've expand our protocols and have walked through every possible permutation of if it's missing from the fall, how do we get an accurate indicator from the spring? If we get to the end of the spring and we don't have an observation, what do we do? But the goal is to make sure that every single classroom is included in the system and kind of clarifying what happens there. And then we've also formalized a review process. So if you have a question or concern with your review, sort of like an appeal, that you'll be able to express that in writing. As I noted before, one of the big challenges and opportunities of the system is that we really empower any person within the system and try to build a ton of local capacity to do observations, which means that your principal at the school can do these observations, the child care director. There's, of course, a risk of bias there, right? And so really thinking through how we can use a third party smartly and strategically across the state to make sure that there's credibility in the system, that there's consistency and accuracy across the state. And this is great because not only does it help get accurate information across these 12,000 classrooms, but it also helps the local observers get more accurate, right? If you have somebody going behind you, also observing that same classroom, it then gives you a comparable data point. So the regulations, or the guidelines rather, in front of you lay out how this third party will work. We will make sure that every site, every age is observed. It won't be twice a year. It'll be either fall or spring, but ballpark, that means about 75% of the classrooms overall will be observed. And this will give you a good or a good number of counterpoints throughout the system. This will help us address irregular scoring patterns. This will help us support observers better. And this will help make sure that we don't have drift or bias or any of the things that, if you imagine all of a sudden we're 3 years into this and folks in the north say our scores look really higher or lower than another part of the state. How do we know that your observers aren't biased, right? Or something like that, a critique like that. So we think that these investment in the external observations which will be one party statewide that was competitively procured to do this, will help build credibility in the system. We also have good data from my work in Louisiana that suggested not only does this help drive improvement, but we got more accurate each year. So as we look at when we have to replace scores because they look inaccurate, we saw that that number went down each year as we saw overall improvement. So it's really not only does it help develop credibility in the system, but those are the absolute pristine, unbiased results from the state that enable us as an office to come to the board and say, we are confident in the overall improvement, we are confident in the accuracy and the credibility statewide. In terms of the curriculum measurement, no big shifts here. Just to note that we have more approved options than we did a year ago. This system does not require curriculum. You can still meet expectations and choose not to use an approved curriculum, but we wanted to make sure there are resources, and we continue to make big investments in Stream N 3, which is our competitively procured free option that's available, and that we prioritize not only the curriculum, but the supports, the coaching, the training to use the curriculum in childcare and family childcare that don't have curriculum. This talks a little bit, section 6 talks about the changes to determining the VQB5 results. And so let me talk for a moment about sites improvement planning. So again, if you score a need support, which is what, a very sort of what is generally agreed upon, a fairly low score, you will be required to participate in site improvement planning. Again, of the 2,600 sites that participated last year, we had roughly 17, right? So these are going to be small numbers, but as a board, as you think about how do we raise the floor here, really thinking about where are the sites that I consider to be in most need, right, that really need our support, and how do we make sure that they participate? We will set up a structure of case management where we will reach out to these sites. We will say you need to participate in planning. We will have a simple template and form, and we will engage them to avail themselves of resources that are already free or low cost and available to them, but really make sure that they know how to participate, help them make sense of the various resources. Should you focus on curriculum or coaching or kind of more in-depth consultation, following up each month to see if you do this. So a really intensive approach to support our sites in need of support. It will be required. We will not require an expectation on growth, but the only expectation will that you fully participate as per the guidelines. So I think that's a big shift, but when we hope that will give this board confidence that we are addressing those programs across the state that need the most support. And lastly, we add a process about data verification. So really making sure before we make these profile results public that they are they're fully verified, much learning from the steps that we take around K-12 accreditation. As noted in last year's regulations, we said we would not just do letters to sites, but we would actually create a parent or family-friendly online portal. And so that work is well underway, procuring a vendor who can support us, and then really intensive work over the course of a year with practitioners, with families across the state to build a family-friendly, user-friendly website that you can find this information on. And that's be critically important as we look towards fall of 2024. And then a little bit more detail here on the site improvement planning. And again, the goal being that this is our mechanism for getting to our sites in the greatest need of support. I will also note that we look at folks that score just above that level as well, and we prioritize them for the coaching, the consultation, the support for the curriculum, the other, and ballpark, it's roughly a $30 million investment in improvement, the vast majority of which goes to childcare and family childcare, and making sure that those sites who are in the most need are prioritized. That's a big shift from before when it was really first come, first served. And so what you found was that some of our great childcare partners who do incredible work were always the first ones to ask for the coaching or for the support. They had the most wherewithal. And so this flips that. And we have charged each of the programs that we fund to do improvement to make sure that they're prioritizing the lowest performers. So we've addressed each of the challenges in the data, with the vast majority of the staying the same, and laying out each of those sections and how we've addressed that. Again, with us ultimately sort of confidently saying to you, we are prepared to fully implement this. We will continue to use a data-driven approach to make sure that we're supporting all of the programs. And the thing that we will monitor very closely is our sites in need of support and how we engage them very deeply. We are going to make sure to minimize disruptions for families. And ultimately, as Ms. Creasy noted, I think the biggest challenge facing us, well, how do we support this workforce predominantly on the access side? And so really thinking about how we fund these programs more similar to K-12 to meet these expectations. And last but not least, we will continue to engage the field very deeply at every step in the process. So watching the time, Mr. Gecker, I think I'm pretty darn close here. On behalf of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, I recommend that the board receive for first review the 2023-2024 guidelines for the Early Childhood Unified Measurement and Improvement System, known as VQB5.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions by board members? Yeah, man, you have comments?
Well, just a comment, no
Yeah.
questions. Just again, wanting to acknowledge the work that Ms. Conway and the team are doing to try and get this right. I really appreciated having an opportunity to talk, very specifically about some of the concerns and the hope that, the board will keep in mind. This is a very fragile system. It is absolutely incredible that Virginia is moving in this direction to really try and increase access to quality early learning, and it's a fragile system. And so it is easy to have unintended consequences emerge if there is not care and attention being focused on the supports that are needed to do this. The observations are really just one part of what programs are committing to when they're participating. There's a full suite of assessment activities that programs have to follow through with. And I just hope that as we move on this path, we're going to keep in mind, let's push quality, but make certain that we are funding the support that's needed so that we don't further challenge an already challenged system. Subsidy providers have a choice. They don't have to serve children that are under-resourced. They can walk away. When they walk away, families who are working lose access to care. They lose access to care, all of a sudden, their family stability is in jeopardy. We need to make sure we understand that as we think about aspiring to see quality happen across the Commonwealth for all young children. So again, I really appreciate the care and attention that is always reflected in how this team has engaged providers and really across the state. I have been very impressed and certainly just, want to again thank the staff for the work that they're doing to help get this right. They really are very, 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 very diligent in their responsiveness and their willingness to listen and adjust as very critical feedback is being offered.
Thank you, Dr. May.
I just want to say I've been in national work with this work for quite some time, and this is nationally groundbreaking. This is incredibly impressive, and I would be remiss not to be able to say that on the record the first time that Ms. Conway has presented, but this is really, really impressive work, and it is not happening across the country. I know sometimes it's easy to get into Virginia space, but I'm just incredibly proud of this work and excited for our youngest learners and our families who can trust in a quality opportunity for learning for their youngest children.
Okay. Ms. Holton.
It's echoing the thank you. And then just the one question is the hearing, especially, yes, about the importance of the work, but also the fragility, the money, the cost. I see $25 million being spent on the retention recognition financial incentives, which are so crucial in light of the data you've given us about turnover, especially. That I assume much of that is coming from federal sources. Are some of those federal sources time-limited sources? And do we have a plan for continuity if those federal sources are ending?
Absolutely. Great question, Ms. Holton. So some portion of it is actually is a state investment. This was a huge success story and something that was initially tested during a temporal federal grant. That great grant went away, but the state made an investment in Recognized B5 based on the positive results of that. We do support it now with additional federal dollars. It is allowable to use it. Part of the Child Care and Development Block Grant allows you to put aside what are called quality set-aside dollars so we can continue to sustain this program more broadly. Some of the changes that this board has supported that were put in place by the General Assembly around this very key concept of funding programs to meet quality expectations. So the language that was changed for VPI to re-benchmark it, and more importantly, the language that was changed in last year's budget to fund the child care subsidy programs to meet these expectations does mean that we are, at this point in Virginia, funding more kids than we've ever funded before at higher rates than we've ever provided before. But so our expectations have raised, and we've realized that this is very much in response to family demand, and we also have historic unemployment, right? And these things are all related. And so there are kind of questions: how will Virginia sustain this investment in the private sector? The exciting thing on the horizon is the passage of the Early Childhood Commission law that will charge our select members of our legislature, as well as other folks who are identified by the Secretary of Education and other associations, to really look at that very question. So what have these investments been? What has the state investment been? What has the federal investment been? What is the need to support Virginia's booming economy? What does that mean? As Dr. Mann described, right, particularly for some of our lower wage employees who help make our economy run day in, day out, and their need, whether in military or direct service or whatever role in the economy, their need to have access to affordable, quality childcare so that they can go to work or go to school or pursue greater self-sufficiency. So that's an open question right now that we will continue to support the efforts by the Secretary of Education to inform that commission and to make recommendations on how to sustain these investments and the right mix of state and federal funding.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Conway. We'll take this
you.
on first review. We'll see you in June.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, item M, first review of revisions to the Career and Technical Education High Quality Work-Based Learning Guide. Hello.
Hey.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right, my name is Anthony Williams. I'm the Acting Director for the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. And here with me for the presentation this afternoon, we have Sharon Acuff, our Work-Based Learning Coordinator for the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. So greetings to President Gecker, members of the board, and Superintendent Coons. We bring before you revisions to the Career and Technical Education High Quality Work-Based Learning Guide. Career and technical education in Virginia is delivered through classroom instruction, career and technical student organizations, and our high-quality work-based learning experiences. Virginia recognizes 12 high-quality work-based learning experiences that enable students to apply classroom instruction in a real-world business or service-oriented work environment with the goal of assisting students with the transition from the classroom to the workplace. High-quality work-based learning experiences include job shadowing, service learning, mentorships, externships, school-based enterprises, internships, entrepreneurship, cooperative education, clinical experiences, youth registered and registered apprenticeships, and supervised agricultural experiences. High-quality work-based learning experiences pair students' interests or career goals with school-coordinated workplace experiences paired with instruction and performed in partnership with business and industry. The last legislative revision of the CTE High Quality Work-Based Learning Guide was approved by the Board of Education in November of 2020. Revisions were in response to House Bill 1680, directing the board to review and revise the guide to expand opportunities for students to earn credit for graduation through high-quality work-based learning experiences. It has become necessary from our office to ensure that annual technical content revisions and new content is explored on an annual basis. This guidance document that includes the revisions before you will provide school divisions with consistent information needed to support high-quality work-based learning experiences. At this time, I would like to ask Sharon Acuff to review the proposed revisions.
Good afternoon. The revisions to the technical content include a revised cover with the 2023-2024 date added along with new section pages for each of the 12 high-quality work-based learning experiences. An update to the students with disabilities section. The career and technical education high-quality work-based learning opportunities in Virginia chart headings were modified for clarity, along with reordering the high-quality work-based learning experiences on the chart to coincide with the roadmap. A list of forms needed to be submitted for each experience was added to the individual experience at-a-glance charts within each of the 12 high-quality work-based learning experiences. To promote safety of the workplace, a CTE high-quality work-based learning workplace evaluation checklist was added as a required form for all experiences not governed by specific regulations. A CTE high-quality work-based learning training agreement was added for supervised agricultural experience immersion experiences to align with the training agreement used across all the other high-quality work-based learning experiences. Emergency medical technician, emergency medical responder, nurse aide, and nursing clinical experiences sections were updated with guidance from the Virginia Department of Health Professionals and the Virginia Department of Health. The section for registered apprenticeship and youth registered apprenticeship was updated by the Virginia Department of Labor and Industry. The service learning project partner evaluation form was updated to reflect participation of a group of students rather than an individual. It can be either individual or a group. And lastly, for revisions to technical content, the at-a-glance for schools and at-a-glance for businesses promotional resources have been updated. Now, new program content added includes a new English learners section was added. And over the last year, the Virginia Department of Labor and Industry, the Virginia Department of Health Professionals, and the Virginia Department of Education collaborated to provide guidance for clinical experiences for the CTE pharmacy technician programs. The Virginia Department of Labor and Industry guidance and background information for VDOE and school divisions on CTE high school for pharmacy technician training programs was added. The work training agreement DocuSign process, the work training written agreement, the pharmacy clinical affiliation agreement, and the pharmacy log timesheet were also added. That's a mouthful. Okay. For the service learning experience, a group project student list was added. And lastly, for new program content, the high quality CTE, high quality work-based learning experiences roadmap was added. So as you can see, a great deal of work has gone into revising and updating the new high-quality work-based learning guide. So it is a meaningful resource to be used by students, parents, business and industry stakeholders, and school divisions to implement high-quality work-based learning programs across the Commonwealth. Following approval by the board, the revised CTE high-quality work-based learning guide will be posted to Town Hall for public comment for a period of 30 days. Final publication of the guide will be made available to school divisions on or before July 1st, 2023. A superintendent's memo will be released to notify school divisions of new technical content revisions and new program content as they prepare for the upcoming school year. The Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends that the Board of Education waive first review and approve the revisions to the Career and Technical Education Work-Based Learning Guide for implementation in the 2023-2024 school year.
Thank you.
Are there questions?
Are there questions?
That's your part.
That's my part. That's okay.
Sorry about that.
I'm always happy to have somebody bear that burden for me. So thank you. Any questions? I don't see any. Presentation was complete. Is there a motion to adopt the recommendation, waive first review, and approve? Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sturtevant. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congrats.
Thank you.
All right, item N.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, with me for this presentation, I have Jane Brown. Jane Brown is the Industry Credentialing Specialist for the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education. The Office of Career Technical and Adult Education annually presents additions and deletions to the list of Board of Education approved industry credentials, occupational competency assessments, and professional licenses. Submission for new credentials and updates to existing credentials were accepted through the Career and Technical Education Credential Portal through December 15th, 2022. New credential submissions, as well as updates to existing credentials, are organized by CTE program areas and thoroughly analyzed by a team of 7 program area specialists, the curriculum and instruction coordinator, and the industry credentialing specialist, who verify that each industry credential meets the required criteria. CTE program areas includes agricultural education, business and information technology, family and consumer sciences, health and medical sciences, technology education, marketing, and trade and industrial education. At this time, I would like to ask Jane Brown to provide background information and to review the proposed additions and deletions before you.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
According to the Association of Career and Technical Education, the ACTE, education and work-related credentials are important milestones for many individual career pathways. Both at the secondary and post-secondary level, students have the opportunity to earn credentials that verify skill mastery, educational attainment, and the authority to perform a task or operation conveying real economic benefits in the labor market. Virginia Administrative Code 8 VAC 20-131-51 states, both the standard diploma and advanced studies diploma shall provide multiple paths toward college, career, and citizenship readiness for students to follow in the later years of high school. Each such pathway shall provide meaningful and rigorous opportunities tied to instruction to achieve workplace and citizenship skills through experiences such as internships, externships, credentialing, and blended learning, which may be offered for credit towards high school graduation. Additional requirements detail the following. In accordance with the standards of quality, students shall, 1, complete an advanced placement, honors, international baccalaureate, or dual enrollment course. 2, complete a high-quality work-based learning experience as established by board guidance on work-based learning. Or 3, earn a career and technical education credential approved by the board. The required criteria for reviewing and validating industry credentials according to Virginia Administrative Code 8 VAC 20-131-110C is the following. 1, the test must be standardized and graded independently of the school or school division in which the test is given. 2, the test must be knowledge-based. 3, the test must be administered on a statewide, multi-state, or international basis, or administered as part of another state's accountability assessment program. And 4, to be counted in a specific academic area, the test must measure content that incorporates or exceeds the SOL content in the course for which verified credit is given. Additionally, each credential should align with state-approved CTE courses, be recognized as post-secondary credentials, or be of value to secondary students seeking entry-level employment. Currently, there are 434 board-approved credentials listed in our student credential catalog, representing 626 individual industry or trade association certifications,
professional licenses, and occupational competency assessments. This year, 282 new credential applications were submitted for our review. After much research from state staff and the necessary communication between credentialing vendors and school divisions, business and industry, 24 new credentials have been recommended for addition to our student catalog. These credentials meet the board's graduation requirements, verified credit requirements, and the diplomacy requirements for exemplary performance in CTE and STEM. There is one new credential recommendation for agriculture education program area, 12 new credentials recommended for the program area of business and information technology, one new credential in family and consumer sciences, 2 credentials in health and medical sciences, 2 in technology education, 4 in trade and industrial education, and 2 examinations for the International Baccalaureate IB certificates. Industry or trade association certification examinations, professional licenses, and occupational competency assessments are continually being revised or discontinued by the vendors. This year, credential providers have discontinued 4 previously approved certification examinations that we too are recommending for deletion. Of the 4 credential deletions, there are 2 deletions within the program areas of business and information technology, 1 in trade and industrial education, and 1 examination for the International Baccalaureate certificate. Dr. Williams?
Following approval by the board, the revised credentialing list will need to be updated within our state online repository for courses and credentials housed and managed on our CTE Resource Center website that includes examination details and testing accommodations for publication on or before July 1, 2023. The superintendent's memo will be released to notify school divisions of the additions and the deletions to the Board of Education approved list of industry certifications, occupational competency assessments, and professional licenses, allowing the time for school divisions to plan for the 2023-24 school year. The superintendent of public instruction recommends that the Board of Education waive first review and approve the revisions of the proposed list of 2023-24 Board of Education approved industry credentials, occupational competency assessments, and professional licenses for implementation in the upcoming school year.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Don't see any. Is there a motion then to waive first review and adopt?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sturtevant. And is there a second?
Second.
I didn't hear which one.
Second.
Thank you, Andy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you for your time.
All right, item O. We have a written report. Mr. Hanson, Mr. Rotherham, you are both on the committee. Anything you'd like to add to the report?
Bill, go ahead. I did the last one. Go ahead. I want to thank the staff. I feel like we had our first meeting up at George Mason University in January, and we've come a long way in the last couple of months. But I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, and as reflected by the quality and the quantity of applications coming in, and also Joan Wadiska, who is serving as the chair, has also just really brought a sense of discipline and structure to our work, and we've had full participation from our other board members outside of Andy and I. So I just really want to compliment them for the body of work and where we're going. It's been exciting to see the evolution and the partnership with the higher education community, the local communities, and ranging from HBCUs to community colleges to some of our flagship universities. So it's been very productive.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, it's been great. And you'll see in the report, and I know it's late in the day, so I don't want to belabor this. You can read the report, but I would urge you, there's a couple of requests, including some actions that the board could take. And so I'd urge you to look at those. They include just some reporting and so forth, basic stuff, and then also some ways we may be able to expedite this process and some professional learning communities that we may want to establish. But again, I recognize it's been a long 2 days, so I'd urge you to read that and you can get a sense of the work and where we're going. And I would concur, Joan's done a terrific job chairing the committee, and John Bailey is just contributing as a citizen because he believes in education here. And Pam Moran, as we mentioned, a former division superintendent, is also volunteering her time, and we're very grateful to all of them.
Okay, thank you. Anything, I guess now we're on to items board members want to discuss. Is there anything we haven't discussed? Anybody have any comments?
There was a request for an ESSER report. Would you like that at the May or the June board meeting?
Probably be better for June, since I think only 5 of us are going to be at the May meeting.
Yeah, the plan for May, and I just want to make this clear, is there are 2 items that are time sensitive that we need to hear. I don't want everybody to travel here if they don't need to hear those items. They can participate remotely. We've talked about that. I plan to limit the agenda to those 2 items so that nobody feels the need to be here, who's not already planning, in the area. And so I don't want to add to the May 11 agenda.
Agreed. Mr. President, I was planning on coming. We do need 5 members in person, right?
We do, and I think, we can regroup after this meeting, but my understanding is Ms. Holton, who was a maybe, is now a can be here. And so there may be an opportunity for somebody who was going to be here to get the 5 in person that we need to not come and participate remotely.
Still plan on it, but maybe we'll just be in touch beforehand.
Yeah, we'll be in touch to make sure we have the quorum locally as well as the online capability. But again, the plan is we have 2 items that are critical for time, and to hear those, and that's it.
Maybe just for public consumption, a reminder of what the 2 are for.
One is for early childhood for Jenna, and the other is for Kent and school funding.
It's actually VLA for Jenna.
I'm sorry, VLA. You're exactly right. I apologize. I knew it was Jenna.
It's still okay to say early childhood.
But that's, VLA for Jenna. Yep. So those are the 2 items. Nothing is routine, but I think they're close to routine. Were it not for the times constraints built into the various rules, we wouldn't have to have this meeting.
Just as a procedural matter, will we be accepting public comment? And will we be accepting public comment?
It is my understanding that I do not have to accept, and we're not going to accept public comment at a special meeting. Like I said, this is not a regularly scheduled meeting of the board. I will coordinate with the AG's office to be sure that's the correct impression, but the plan is we can call a special meeting for a specific purpose or purposes. Those are the 2 purposes. I plan to have those 2 things heard, and that's it. Yes, ma'am.
Just want to join in your welcome earlier to Dr. Coons, and we're so delighted to have you here and look forward to working with you. I have heard you say in a couple of different contexts now, your priorities include workforce and pathways to success across the different educational sections and focusing on teacher shortages. And I just think those are crucial, and so look forward to hearing what you can help us do on those things that are all very much things we can work across the aisle on and across all around this podium on. I in particular, you and I had an opportunity to speak, and you mentioned briefly earlier, but this I'm hoping we can do whatever we can on an emergency basis as well as a longer term fixed basis about this licensure backlog. We just can't have a licensure backlog when we're hearing from the school divisions about the crisis they're facing in getting teachers in. And so if there's any emergency stuff that can be done, even if it needs the legislature's still due to come back apparently on the budget. So you should have the full range of options, and I'm sure the Secretary's office will support you on it and will support you on it if there's anything that can be done to help alleviate those immediate challenges as well as the long-term challenges.
Just in response to that, we have 2 different task force we're launching next week to figure out exactly what we need to do in the short term and in the long term to start supporting our school divisions and making sure they're fully staffed.
Okay.
Just on the ESSER funding, if I would just volunteer to be engaged between now and June, just to make sure we're maybe addressing some of the key things I would like to be interested in, and if anybody else is as well.
That's it. We are adjourned. Thanks for everything.
For the record,